What's your experience working with China vis-a-vis working with India? What are some of your learnings?
It's kind of the gold standard of what an exporter should be in many ways. Their response time is amazing. They're extremely organized, extremely efficient, tend to be on time.
Where do you think India is lacking?
We don't have the same ability to make certain products on a global level yet for certain categories. We don't have the machinery here, the ecosystem, the level of understanding of what global quality should be, but the young generation is going to change all that.
How is Vietnam compared to India in terms of sourcing?
Vietnam is beating India despite having a much smaller population. And the other dynamic is because it's so neighboring culture to Chinese, you have a higher percentage of mainland Chinese going there and able to set up the exact same operation with the same efficiency, same quality.
Chinese, on the other hand, my experience has been that they're very much on the ball.
I've dealt with some other countries here and there, Indonesia, but very little. But Europeans constantly on vacation.
So I have a confession to make. The gentleman I'm about to interview today, I had never met him until he walked in through that door just a few minutes ago. I reached out to him on Instagram because I liked his content, sent him a DM, and after a bit of back and forth, we locked in a date to shoot this podcast. It's really gracious of him to agree to appear on my podcast, but I also think he picked really well. So, Rohit, welcome to the Plush Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rahul.
Yeah, great to have you here. And you've spent some time, well, you've grown up in LA, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
I'd love to start off with your journey and what got you here.
Sure. So I worked a corporate job for about 1 year in my early 20s and very quickly decided that was not the field I wanted to go into.
Let's go even before.
Okay.
Yeah. Were you born and raised in LA?
Sure, yeah. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay.
Born and raised in LA, went to school in the Bay Area. And in early on in my school career, I had the opportunity to spend a year at DU, SRCC. So I showed
That's
up.
Delhi University.
In
India.
In Delhi University, India. Showed up to DU when I was 19 years old. Spent a year
As
here
an exchange student?
as an exchange student. So a lot of people go somewhere else. And I think I shocked my family when I went from LA to Delhi, spent a year in Delhi.
Yeah.
And since that is really the beginning of my professional relationship with India, traveled all throughout India in that time, and that's what eventually led me to do business in India. And today I'm an Indian importer-exporter.
Yeah.
I started my career actually with Chinese trade. Within the first 5 years of importing products from China to the US, just because of the way I look, and my name's Rohit Kumar, all the meetings I went into, again and again, people ask me, can you make this product in India? We don't want to buy from China. You're Indian, can you make it in India? So after I got asked that question 1,000 times, then I decided I should probably go and make a trip to India because there's some significant opportunity here.
Right.
And that was the beginning of my Indian export journey. And today, in 2024, I started doing what I do, import-export consumer products in 2011. So today in 2024, starting from 100% China export, my trade volume is right now about 60% India. So I'm still involved in China, still have a team in China, but I've switched to about 60% India, and that's growing as well.
The government of India would be very happy with you.
Yeah. Big fan of Dr. J. Shankar, and
awesome.
Really want to work. I would love to be more involved with the government of India and Indian businesses, and that's one of the reasons why I'm coming back again and again.
Nice. Went to school in the Bay Area, you mentioned.
Yes.
Right? Where did you go to school?
UC Berkeley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've spent a summer there. We were just chatting, and I've spent a summer way back in a whole different era when I had super long hair and 5 earrings. So yeah, spent some time in Berkeley, fun town. Spent a lot of time at Top Dog, which is at hot dog late night parties and stuff. So spent some time there. But beautiful part of the world. Love California.
Yes.
And since you were in the Bay Area, you could have, I thought you would have probably chosen to go work at Google or something.
Google, yeah.
And yet you chose the import and export trade. How did that come about?
Yeah, so also because I was in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So the Bay Area, the Bay Area, they call it's Silicon Valley, right?
Right.
And similar to how Bangalore is like the Silicon Valley of India.
Right.
I noticed the same pattern in both places. So in Berkeley, in the Bay Area, people are very much into eco-friendly, sustainable, organic food.
Right.
It's the hub of the U.S. of that
Sure.
that type of thinking, those type of products, that type of food.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, when I started coming to India, Bangalore is not only is it the Silicon Valley of India, but it's also the hub of, I notice, all the organic food startups, the sustainable product startups, and all those brands generally centered around Bangalore. So what we understand today to be everyone in the Bay Area is like an app developer, an engineer.
Right.
In 2004 to 2008, when I was there, not the case. None of my friends were becoming engineers. Although they have a strong engineering department and we're in Silicon Valley, equal amount of people were non-engineers to engineers.
Right.
So, and I saw at the time that I was going through in the 4 years that I spent there, I saw multiple companies start that were, because of the environment, the emphasis on sustainability, the nature, all those things that are there. I saw multiple people above me, in the years above me, getting into these sustainable brands. So that's actually how I started.
In the US.
So in the US, yeah. In the Bay Area, just a few years out of Berkeley, I started thinking about what business could I do, wasted / however you want to call it, about 1 year of my life making a tech platform. In 2010, we applied to Y Combinator, and we had this tech platform where it was you share things with your neighbors. And anyways, long story short, it failed. And at that lesson of depending on an engineer, so I'm not an engineer myself, so
Right.
I was depending on an engineer to do all the coding, and I was doing all the marketing. Then
Is that what you studied at Berkeley?
I actually studied political science.
Okay.
And when I went to SRCC, I studied economics. So political science, economics.
Okay.
So my goal, I was thinking eventually I'd go to business school or law school. But yeah, so I eventually decided I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, business. And I saw these people above me starting these businesses, and I saw the general trend towards eco-friendly. And I decided what product, and I also had the failed engineering experience, the failed app experience. So I
Right.
decided, okay, no more apps. Let me get into something where I can control my own destiny and something that I understand without needing an engineer. So
Since you mentioned apps, there's a running joke about Bangalore, and I go to Bangalore a fair bit as well. It's a city where an engineer commutes an hour to go to work to build an app that delivers groceries in 15 minutes. So I don't know if this is the same in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, because I haven't been there in a long time.
yeah.
But yeah, so sorry, you were just talking about apps. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I got into the whole import and export trade was because it allowed me to travel as well. So I put the cart before the horse.
Right.
I really enjoy traveling. So I used to sniff out, events and conferences and trade shows that are happening and plan my travel around that. And that's been a big driver of why I, do business as well. I really enjoy meeting people from different cultures, sourcing different products, getting different ideas. I don't know if you've had a similar experience as well.
Very, very similar.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I entered the field I'm in right now because of a love for travel. So not only my year on my own in Delhi, but beyond that, I explored in my early 20s, explored all around Southeast Asia, South America. And that also, that dictated my career choice actually, because I decided I didn't want to do something like where I'm stuck in one area, like being a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer. I wanted the freedom to travel, and I built my lifestyle around that desire.
Right.
And it's, to your point, that's exactly why I decided on international trade and import-export as a career, because it enabled my travel.
You get an excuse to fly to Asia and India and get back to your roots. And it's also like most Indian parents are wanting to send their kids overseas, at least here, right? They want to send their kids overseas to study. And you had that reverse sort of experience where you went to a really good school in the US, born and raised in LA, yet you chose to do a study abroad in India.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And I got the travel bug after that study abroad.
Visiting India.
Yes. And then going back to the eco-friendly thing, the first product that I ever imported was an eco-friendly bamboo toothbrush from China to the US. And that also enabled more travel. So at in an early age, 23, 24, I was in mainland China, exploring, traveling, seeing the culture, and side by side doing business. So it was a realization of what I had always wanted, that I'm seeing new cultures, I'm exploring new food, places, and side by side, I'm buying something, I'm exporting it. So exactly what you just said.
When you were in India during your study abroad here,
Sure.
which places did you explore besides Delhi where you were based?
So, yeah, I came from a background where every time we came to India from age 1 to 19, it was go to Bua's house, right? We were in Delhi. Sometime for a while, my Bua was living in Calcutta in Hindustan Motor Colony. So in the class 5, I was living with where the Hindustan ambassador car is made.
Yeah.
So, but really no experience outside just seeing family relatives. So when I was on my own at age 19, I decided, hey, let's travel all over this country. So me and the friends that I made in Delhi, we explored all over Delhi. I went to Darjeeling, all over Punjab, all over Himachal, Uttarakhand, Mussoorie, all over the south, Kerala, Pondicherry.
Wow. So I had the reverse experience where, because I'm based here, I wanted to travel overseas.
Right.
So I used to look at events and conferences and trade shows in, of course, Hong Kong and China, because that's sort of the hub. But I also went to conferences for my product line in Frankfurt, in Scandinavia, in LA, in New York, in London. And that was really interesting for me because you get lots of different ideas as well. And you get to see what's working in that market. And I feel like, especially on the West Coast, you can sell them mud in a jar and they'll pay top dollar for that, right? That's the perception, because maybe because some of these products are freely available here, but I think the US does a really good job at packaging goods as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if the product is $2, they'll spend $3 on packaging and then sell it for like $20, right?
Yeah, packaging is the whole packaging and the brand and the creator behind it and the story. I feel like specifically, you're right about the West Coast, specifically the California, that market, which is the 5th largest economy in the world, just that state.
Sure.
So it is a massive market where people have tons of money to spend.
Right.
Yes, it's all about packaging, the vibe of the brand, and to your point, mud in a jar. Yeah, technically, yeah, it's possible.
Right.
It happens there more than anywhere.
So what I used to do was I used to go for these trade events and conferences. And because of my love for travel, I used to take a few days off and make it a pleasure trip. So every work trip is a pleasure trip for me, right? So you attend a conference, you do some meetings, you see new products, and then I would take 2-3 days off just to kind of like film a little bit on my phone. And I ended up creating a travel series out of it, which got me deeper into the travel space, and that's how my product line changed as well. And I've spent some time, exploring the Pacific Coast Highway on the West Coast in your part of the world, beautiful part of the world, and really got to understand the kind of products, at least in my line, in travel and also gifting, right? What kind of products are people using? And lots of learnings there as well. But we've all had our share of disappointments and failures. You mentioned you had one with the app. Has there ever been an instance where you have imported something from either India or China and you've been stuck with stock? Because that's happened to me.
Yeah. I'm still sitting on stock from 8 years ago for certain items. I'll give you one very particular example. So this trend is worldwide. There was some time ago, I forget which year, 2016, 2017, something like that. There was a video which went viral online of a plastic straw stuck in a turtle's nose.
Yes, I've seen that.
And it was only after that now every Starbucks and all these cafes all over Europe and even India, they give you the paper straw.
Paper straw,
right?
yeah.
That is literally that one video that created that atmosphere.
Right.
And after that, governments banned, cities banned plastic straw, just from that one video. And so during that time, before that whole trend happened, I imported several years before that a bamboo drinking straw. So a drinking straw made from bamboo from Meghalaya
Okay.
into the US.
Okay.
And I just had it there. I have a catalog of sustainable products. I have a sustainable product brand called Clean Planetera.
Okay.
Within which currently we have 40 products. Back then we had 10, 15 products. And one of them was this bamboo drinking straw. So it happened to be that whenever you, at that point in time, searched non-plastic drinking straw on Google or any variation of no plastic drinking straw, I was
Right.
number one. Probably number one for 5 years. Not a hot selling product, but as soon as that turtle video went viral, all of a sudden that bamboo drinking straw cannot keep it in stock, right? So what do? Like any young excited person, container. I'm calling these people in Meghalaya. I had to also include Assam.
Yeah.
And I also could not keep enough stock, so I also phoned through a connection. I was able to get them from Indonesia as well. So now I have hundreds of thousands of bamboo drinking straws in my warehouse, and they are selling like crazy. I cannot maintain stock. I even got an inquiry from Starbucks Global in Seattle because of my search result. They were interested. They ultimately never bought because it's impractical to use these. You use a paper drinking straw.
Sure.
Disposable makes more sense. But they got me excited, and I ordered more because they were talking to me. Ultimately, that whole trend I made
Plateaued?
money. It plateaued. I made money for a long time. Finally, the ultimate solution that everyone uses now is the paper drinking straw. You use
Right.
it, dispose it. There's also bioplastic ones. But I'm still sitting on bamboo drinking straws from then, and I'm still selling those. So you always have these situations where you get a little bit too excited. You maybe bought too much inventory, and but luckily that inventory is never going to expire. It's not.
But maybe the packaging gets dirty or
Yeah,
something,
things
right?
can
So you
get
have to like, keep
dirty.
changing the packaging.
Yeah,
It's still a cost on a low cost product.
Every year. So in the US we have homes have fireplaces.
Right.
So every year in the winter, we burn a couple hundred bamboo drinking straws in the fire because I have so much inventory of that.
Right.
And it's good firewood, so it keeps you warm.
That's hilarious. Yeah. But I bet your suppliers in Meghalaya and Assam would be really happy.
They were happy in that time, but I ordered so much from them, and I haven't given them a reorder for 5 years.
So they're chasing you.
They want more business, but I have too much inventory. So to your point, sometimes you just order way too much, and then it doesn't sell.
Right.
I've ordered things where the factory made it wrong. In my early days, I wasn't doing quality checks. You just not basic things of what an importer should do, exporter should do. I didn't do proper quality checks, and imported these toothbrush holders from India actually, and those all burned in my fireplace too. They were all horrible quality.
Right. That's probably one of the downsides of a product business, like a physical product business, right? I mean, even though these don't expire, yet the packaging could get, spoiled. Or in India, we've got a warehouse full of goods that, nobody really wants. And that's just par for course, I guess. And here, because we don't have air-conditioned warehouses like you probably have in Dubai, the weather is, fairly humid.
Yes.
So the ABS plastic gets a little, sticky, and then you just can't do anything with the product. So I've had a lot of that experience as well. But coming back to these nuances when you're doing business with different parts of the world. You mentioned you're doing business with the Far East and India. And I don't know if you've ever worked with the guys in Europe.
Yes.
What are some of the nuances and cultural differences and business practices that, there's a learning curve and makes you wonder, okay, how do I navigate this global landscape?
Well, I think anyone involved in import-export is probably in their career at some point going to touch on China.
Right.
As I know you have as well.
Right.
And it's kind of the gold standard of what a exporter should be in many ways. Their response time is amazing. They're extremely organized, extremely efficient, tend to be on time. nothing has to be explained. It's almost like they're all uniformly pretty good. I've had some bad experiences with China. I've been working with China for 15 years. It was definitely screwed over a lot more in the early days. But now I see, especially a lot of the young people that have come in their 20s, better English, better understanding of global standards in terms of how things should work. I've only seen it get better in China. Comparatively, India, it's not as professional, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I teach export classes to a primarily Indian audience and that's one of the things I say in the seminars that I teach too, is I'm trying to basically take what's happening in the Chinese context, which is why they're so good at manufacturing and export, and transferring that into the younger Indian population. We're just not there in terms of organization, response time, communication. And then you have, to your point, that I've dealt with some other countries here and there, Indonesia, but very little. But Europeans, not to overgeneralize, but I have one factory that I source from in Germany, constantly on vacation.
Oh my God, yeah.
Every day is a holiday. Someone's on maternity leave, or this is closed or that's closed, and things happen on time. But I feel like we have in India the average age 28 years old. China also, people very driven, very fast, very aggressive. Europe is like the complete opposite of that. No one responds to anything. No one's in a hurry, and yet they're renowned for quality and renowned for some of the top products in the world. Like what I buy from Europe is actually a bioplastic. So it's cutting edge technology, and there's nowhere else to find that level of sophistication in the world. But to get it, it's not as easy as when you're sourcing an item from China or India. Both these countries have younger population, more hungry for money, more aggressive for the business, and Europe is more, yeah, we'll take your money, or you can pay us, and it's everything is slower there.
I have a very similar experience. This is about a decade ago, and I had to import one of the products from a French company with a factory in Shanghai. And when I reached out, and I was working on strict deadlines, and when I reached out to this guy to ask him when he's going to send it, he just says, I don't know. And I've made advance payments, and he says, I don't know. I'm going on vacation for 6 weeks. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to get buried here, right? I mean, I have a client, I have a deadline, I have money on the line. So you're absolutely spot on when you say that Europeans can be, and again, not to generalize, but Europeans can be very laid back with their approach to business, and taking Fridays off. And
I've had the opposite of, experience sometimes. I remember last year I was dealing with a European vitamin gummy supplier, and they were super. So there are some people here and there, but the larger company you deal with, to your point, they'll go on vacation, and for them, vacation is no response. Yes. They are gone.
They're gone.
Yeah, 5 p.m. their time, they are gone.
I had a friend in college and university in the US, and we Indians are used to cramming everything last moment and studying for our exams. And this guy would, come hail, come storm, he would go and play soccer just before the final exams. 6 p.m. he has to go and play soccer. And perhaps that's a good thing. There's something to learn, but just way too laid back. And I guess that works if your work involves just being in Europe and doing business within Europe. Right. But when you're dealing in international trade, that can get very tricky. The Chinese, on the other hand, my experience has been that they're very much on the ball, right? So they'll send me WhatsApp messages at 1 a.m, asking for orders, and they're super quick to respond. And I feel like in the last decade, I've learned a lot from these guys as well, and that helps me when I'm exporting overseas as well. With India, I think it's the infrastructure. It's perhaps, the infrastructure is lacking, and that level of professionalism is lacking. Also, what's your experience working with China vis-a-vis working with India? What are some of your learnings?
You're right about the infrastructure. The whole government setup they are an export-oriented country. That's how they that's how they got rich, is by taking items and sending them all over the world. We in this country exported last year more software than Saudi Arabia exported oil. That can be done from sitting on your laptop and doesn't require any roads and infrastructure. So when you visit China and you see how advanced their rail system is and their road system and how smooth everything is, it's very clear how they're able to beat everyone at export and how we don't have the equivalent infrastructure here in India.
There is a perception here in India that whenever you import something from China, especially consumer goods, electronics, that is all cheap stuff. And I disagree with that, because I think China makes quality which is for India, which is a very price sensitive market, and then they make quality that's for Western Europe and the US.
Yes.
Right? And the Western world
Absolutely
in general.
Right. I learned everything that I currently know from working with China first for 5 years. And I have my main contact that I work with when I do something in China, he has a saying which is very relevant to what you just said. He's like, you can buy any price in China.
Right.
You want the worst of the worst, you'll get it. And you want the best of the best, it's also there.
Right.
So you're totally right. It is a misconception that just because it's Chinese, it's horrible quality. They also have the best of the best.
Right. And they're the factory to the world, right? So I've actually seen Italians, Italian furniture is very popular, right, globally.
Yes.
So I've seen Italian designers park themselves in China, in Guangzhou specifically, and work with factories where it's their design and the quality is fantastic. And then they bring it over to Italy and perhaps just stamp it, made in Italy, or I don't even know if they can do that, but it'll just say like a product of Italy or something. So it's a little like, it's not very clear. They'll say product of Italy because it was designed in Italy, but it's manufactured in China.
There are things you can definitely do that just I was reading in the newspaper yesterday, Dior, was that brand?
Yeah.
I don't know the full name. Dior, it's a luxury brand, right? Owned by LVMH.
Yes.
There's a bag that they retail for 2,800 euros.
Right.
And
it's
they were caught. It is made in Italy. Yeah, it's made in Italy
$50.
For 28 euros.
Okay.
So the 2,800 euro sale, made in Italy. But when you actually look, where is it made in Italy? It's made in a Chinese sweatshop in Italy.
Right.
By like horrible working conditions. And so there are a lot of things made in different places, and they use that in the branding.
Right.
But how is it being made? What is being done? You don't know. And country of origin, to your point, is so important when you're selling something, because made in Japan, it has a certain, oh wow, made in Japan must be great. Even if if you look at the manufacturing, 80% of the components are Chinese, and
right. Most likely in Shenzhen, which is across the border from Hong Kong. That's the hardware capital of the world.
Right.
And a lot of the electronics we use, chances are they've been manufactured there, but probably assembled in different parts of the world, right? So I've been to Shenzhen, I've been to Guangzhou, and also in terms of customer service, right? So if you go to these furniture factories outside of Guangzou, in a place called Foshan, and earlier you had to take a taxi or something to get there, and now they have a metro line. You will have the factory owner send you a car and driver to pick you up and bring you to their showroom and wine and dine you. And you'll go to the street in Foshan, which is about an hour odd from Guangzhou, and you'll see like furniture factories on either side of the road, like lined, like miles and miles of just furniture factories. So it's just fascinating how the infrastructure is in terms of like not just the product, but also like making sure that your stay is comfortable in China.
Absolutely.
And the whole industry is geared towards making sure that you have a smooth experience. Even the Canton Fair, if you ever go to the Canton Fair, you will have, the whole city is geared towards, servicing foreign buyers for the fair. And all the hotels have bus services that take you to the fair and bring you back from the fair. So at 8:39 and 9:30 in the morning, and come back at, I think, 5:30, 6 and 6:30. And there are specific parking lots with somebody from their, from the hotel standing with like a placard giving you a bottle of water and a bag of, a small packet of peanuts to make sure that you're, all the stuff that you're doing during the trade show and at least your commute and your transport is all sorted because language is a big problem there.
Culture of really making it a great experience for the foreign buyer.
Yes.
They are the masters of that.
Right.
And it's a very long-term game too, because you'll have these people with job titles from the US and Europe that director of sourcing, director of procurement, VP of product development. These are all people that have made 20 trips to China.
Right.
And if you ask these guys, they're usually 30 to 60-year-old men predominantly. They all love going there because of exactly what you just said. It's a trip they get to make every year, away from family, get a break, be in a hotel, have some nice food, and the Chinese businessman on the other side is doing all these, like you said, all these arrangements for them, wining and dining them. It's a good time. And this similar thing, if we really want to make in India, have to develop a similar culture here, which I do see in the big export houses. They know how to do that stuff. But for the startup, younger people doing it, it's something they have to learn how to do as well.
Where do you think India is lacking?
That understanding of the wining and dining is just one thing. Another thing is communication and response time. You brought that up as well. The Chinese are responding at 1 a.m., 4 a.m.
Yes.
Even the general culture of checking in. So it's not just about response time, but a general constant communication cadence that the Chinese have. So for example, there's a 30-day lead time. A lot of times I'm dealing with a young Indian guy who's sourcing something for me, 30-day lead time. I started, and for 30 days, I don't hear from him. It would not be the same case in China. They would check in with me 2-3 times. So they know how to maintain that constant communication.
Right.
And if something is going to be on time, I generally see the Chinese exporter will flag it. If something's going to be late, they'll flag it. I think it's going to be late. Whereas the Indian exporter might tell me on the last day because he's trying to hide it. But hiding things is not the way to do it. Transparency is what the importer, the buyer, wants.
Right.
So there are a lot of things lacking. Communication is one of them. General quality and capability is another thing. We just don't have the same. We don't have the same ability to make certain products on a global level yet for certain categories. We don't have the machinery here, the ecosystem, the level of understanding of what global quality should be. But the young generation is going to change all that, in my opinion, because they're well-traveled. They know what quality should look like. And the next 10 years are going to be very interesting.
What about efficiency?
Efficiency as well. We have here so many holidays, right?
Right.
Holidays, weather issues. It ties into infrastructure as well. It also ties into the fact that China is a one-party country.
Yes.
There is no way to argue with the government. There's no party coming. There's no party going. It's just, this is what it is. Do it or you're out, right?
Sure.
So that culture drives a countrywide efficiency, which is impossible to achieve just with such a diverse democracy. People don't, I'm not listening to that person. I'm not listening to that person.
I agree with you on the holidays bit, and I face that, and perhaps a lot of small businesses or, the smaller manufacturing units. I'm not talking about these global players who've come here. I don't know how it works for them. But what happens here is, especially in the second half of the year, the holidays start, right? And I guess that's one of our strengths as well. We're a multicultural, very, very diverse country. So that's definitely, we wouldn't have it any other way. But the flip side of that is that every few weeks in the second half of the year, especially starting like July, August, there are too many holidays. So that breaks the flow of work. And then you've got infrastructure which is not up to the mark. So, it's raining, the city gets shut down.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Things like that really make it slightly harder to be efficient. Whereas in China, you've got the Chinese New Year, which happens, I think, at the end of Jan. So globally, everybody knows that for those 2 or 3 weeks, so they try and push in their orders before Chinese New Year. Exactly. And I think it's 1 week in the first week of October that the Chinese take off, right? So twice a year, these guys take off. But outside of that, these guys are working 24/7.
Right.
But here in the second half of the year, you'll have 3 weeks, then you'll have, one section of your workers who will probably want to go back to their villages and they won't come back for a month, and then somebody else will do that. So it kind of like breaks the momentum in many ways.
Yeah. You're right. We don't have an infrastructure yet that is able to withstand the weather.
Right.
They have extreme weather all over China as well, but they've built provisions. If an item if an item needs to stay dry or item needs to stay warm or cold, they've made provisions for that so they can never stop production all year round.
Sure.
Like, for example, when I was importing those bamboo drinking straws I was talking about earlier, I could have easily gotten that from China, never-ending supply. But people don't want made in China. The general American consumer does not want to see made in China. They think it's lower quality. They think it's untrustworthy, right? So I dealt with India, but the Indian supplier would tell me stuff like, it's raining today. It's raining this week. So now we are 10 days late. And I was thinking, you have no provision that means to continue production when it's raining. The rain is affecting your production lead time, which shouldn't. There's no provision, and that would never be the case in China. They'll cover themselves for all weather conditions,
right?
So they can continue producing year round, regardless of the weather.
Yeah.
Which there's small things like that which affect efficiency, just because there's not as much investment in the factories themselves. The factories themselves. You probably have seen in your own experience. We have some really amazing factories here, and we have some really more looking like a handmade, like a much less professional operation.
You mentioned that Americans don't quite trust Chinese products. Now, is this a post-COVID phenomenon, or has this always been the case?
It's always been the case, at least from when I got into it, and even before I got into it. So I've been into import-export since 2011. From the very beginning of my experience, there was already a very strong anti-China sentiment in terms of there's a perception that if it's multiple ways. So if it's made in China, how can it be eco-friendly? People just bluntly ask that question. How can it be eco-friendly? It's made in China.
Right.
Meaning there's a dissociation in their head that China and eco-friendly is impossible because there's something there, right?
Yeah.
They also have a perception, exactly like the average Indian customer, that their China must be lower quality, which is a misconception because they do have high quality over there. And they also have the perception that...
Well, Apple iPhones are made in China. There you go.
But
talk about quality, right?
Yeah. But there's a reason, if you look on the back of every iPhone, it says they're designed in California, right?
Right.
They try to offset that made in China with the designed in California, right? Even I do that on a lot of my country of origin stuff that is coming from China. It'll always say designed in US and made in China. I always try to offset that made in China somehow. Additionally, any food, anything you put in your body, anything you put on your head is completely cannot come from China into the US or European market. There is an inherent distrust there. They're not going to use Chinese shampoo on their head. They're not going to use Chinese toothpaste in their teeth. They're afraid the hair will fall out, the teeth will fall out. Even though they have a very high quality standard of those products there.
Right.
Korea is okay. India is okay. There are 8 Indian toothpastes sold in the market next to my house in Los Angeles. The average customer, American customer, has no idea.
Indian pharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
there you
Indian
go.
pharmaceuticals. If you flip over the Vicks Vapor Up in Walmart, made in India. So the shampoos are made in India, toothpaste made in India. So much food made in India. Garbanzo beans, chickpea. So many of the American food products on the shelf. Flip over the thing, it's made in India. They'll eat it, no problem. But if you see made in China on the back of a food product, no one's eating that. No one is going to touch that food. So, and these are all just stereotypes that have become so prevalent that is just the way the market is. No one's going to eat Chinese food. No one's going to use Chinese personal care products.
But Chinese food is so popular in the US.
It's so popular. So a Chinese exporter can sell noodles and green tea, but if you ask them to do anything else, it's too much distrust. No one's going to. For example, if I was to export a veggie burger from India. I have this one client actually that's doing these mushroom-based veggie burgers, and it could never be sold in the U.S. market as China. India is okay.
America is the biggest buyer of Chinese goods. The biggest trading partner for America is China, right?
That's correct. Yeah. There's an active effort to reduce that dependence, and this gets into actually what you were saying before, and now I remembered what I was going to say before. So there was already an anti-China sentiment pre-COVID. And COVID just made that 10 times. Because
Right.
and now everyone's more afraid. They think it's the origin of the virus, or it is the origin of the virus. And it makes it so that people are even more trying to unplug themselves from that supply chain. Even before COVID, in 2018, Donald Trump put this blanket import tax on all Chinese goods. It's called the Section 301 tariffs. So
I was going to ask you
Yeah.
about that because China and the US are also in this tussle for supremacy.
Yes.
In terms of, one's obviously a superpower and the other one is hot on its heels as a superpower as well in its own right. And what's the US doing to kind of stem that, right? And you mentioned one of the things they're doing is this tax provision.
Right. Yeah, this is one of the big, because China's power and wealth over the last 40 years has come from just selling stuff primarily to America. That's the biggest buyer for everything.
Right.
Now they're more diverse. They have their own domestic market. They sell to Europeans, South Americans. Even Africa is a big one for them. But the U.S. just has, since 2018, has made a conscious effort to unplug from China. The import taxes is part of that. Trump put them in, and recently Biden reinforced them. So that means that doesn't matter which party you're from in America, uniformly you're trying to unplug from China. And now if we have another Trump presidency in November, he's promised to increase further. So there's an active effort to stop sending them money because of all the things, like you mentioned, that they're doing. They're building up military bases all over the world, and they're consciously trying to become a dominant. It would be one thing if they're trying to become just a dominant economic power and just buying a lot of nice cars and nice houses. That's not what they're trying to do. They're also pouring all that money into military bases, airplanes, weapons, all these things which scare everyone else, particularly the U.S. And that's why the U.S. is trying to stop sending them so much money in the form of imports every year.
Right.
And that it's a conscious effort, and it's doesn't matter which party comes into power. That's the new policy. Sending us money over there.
Well, India's had some geopolitical tensions with China as well, even though we trade a lot with China. But because of some of these tensions, it's become harder to import certain finished goods and consumer goods from China into India. But the thing is, we're not quite geared to produce some of those goods at scale. So we're sort of caught in this gray area where we need those goods here, but we haven't been able to manufacture those goods and find good factories and produce them at scale, which are world class,
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges that we're currently facing.
Yeah.
And it happened with some of these electronics and, these Bluetooth speakers
Right,
and power banks and stuff.
It's similar all over the world, to be honest. No one can completely unplug from that supply chain.
Yeah.
They just put some of these countries, especially the U.S., have put these taxes to try to make it a little bit painful, so buyers start shifting away where possible.
But where do they shift to?
Yeah, that's the thing. For a lot of these things, you can't. For the products you mentioned, Bluetooth, things like speakers, electronics, where can you go? That's all made in China.
Right.
And impossible to duplicate the supply chain.
Yeah.
And Chinese are smart too. They're not sitting there just taking punches. All they're doing. It's easy for them with all their millions of USD in capital that they've been making for the last 2 decades, to now just set up a factory in Vietnam,
Right.
set up a factory in Mexico,
Sure.
even set up a factory in this country, and do the exact same thing that they've been doing for the last 2 decades. They know how to do it,
Right.
and that they're not idiots either. They're able to move with what's going on, and I think what we're going to see increasingly is more and more Chinese factories setting up all over the world, and then now it's not made in China.
Right.
And they're employing local people, but ultimately they're still the bosses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think some of the Taiwanese guys are doing that as well, especially with semiconductors. TSMC, right, is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And I think because of the China-Taiwan political tension, these guys are setting up factories because that's a critical component, right? So they're setting up factories, I think, in Germany and in the US and I think other parts as well.
Yeah.
And they're trying to hedge against China. But where's the opportunity for the Indian exporter or Indian manufacturer here? I've noticed you mentioned several times online that we have a window of opportunity where the Indian manufacturer can really take advantage of the situation, and it's not going to be there forever.
It's true. So there is a window, because right now global supply chains are shifting. You have a situation where just the Biden administration affirmed that they're keeping all these import taxes, and even raised some of them 50%, 100% on electric vehicles. And that puts everyone in boardrooms all over the world, in the top export markets. You have the CEO, and you have their director of buying, or director of sourcing, or director of procurement, the guy that makes all the products show up for the company. They all have directives. China +1. We should not be so dependent on China anymore. You need to have multiple factories per SKU, or at least a diverse portfolio of factories that are not just 100% in China. So you have all these people with this directive now that you must be, in the next 3 years, diversified beyond China. And there's a limited number, there's a handful of countries you can pick from. India is one of them. Vietnam is one of them. So certain things you can do in Mexico and South America, Africa as well. But really the top contenders for that shift, it's India and Vietnam primarily. And between those two, India's population dwarfs Vietnam.
Of course.
So,
but how is Vietnam compared to India in terms of sourcing?
Vietnam, I haven't done a lot of work in Vietnam, but just from what I've heard through other colleagues and associates that source from Vietnam, it's closer to China in terms of they're beating India in terms of their ability to close a deal with the quality needed. And the other dynamic is, because it's so neighboring culture to Chinese, you have a higher percentage of mainland Chinese going there and able to set up the exact same operation with the same efficiency, same quality. So I think I looked at some research some months ago, and they were saying that if you look at total export volume shift out of China, Vietnam is beating India despite having a much smaller population.
Right.
Overall, though, there's a lot of potential on the table for Indian exporters. You can, in a situation where buyers are looking for alternatives to China, and they're specifically looking right now, that means they're going to respond to your emails right now. And in 5 years, once they've already made that shift, they may not be as open to responding to you. So
Sure.
Now's the time to put yourself out there as an option. Even if it requires, so for example, I have this one client I'm working with right now in the US, in California. They have a solar light operation with nationwide distribution in the US. So you can imagine how much buying power they have. They have 2 wholly owned factories in China where they do these American people, but 2 wholly owned factories in China where they do the solar lamp production. And they're just looking at India as a strategic destination long-term to do this product that's never going to go away for a long time, solar lamp. And it's beyond our internal capability here. You have certain people like that where they're a foreign investor, they have the capital, they have the knowledge and the resources, and they're just looking for a local partner, and they're willing to help and invest. And I've been approached multiple times. I have multiple clients like that where they know certain capability and production and efficiency is not there yet, but China was in that situation 30 years ago too.
Sure.
And they're willing to invest, pick a local partner, and work to develop the Indian factory production over time. A lot of investors have a lot of buyers are not just buyers. They're willing to make a long-term investment because they think the country has potential. And I think that you're seeing that a lot in India right now.
And also because it's getting harder for them to import directly from China.
Exactly. Yeah, they have a directive in their company to move away from China. They want to de-risk themselves from 100% China importing. Absolutely.
So what do you think, are some of the best practices for Indian entrepreneurs? If you had to pick maybe 2 or 3, what can they do to get up to speed with China? And similarly, if you have the Western counterparts in the US or Europe, if they have to work with India, what should they be looking at?
So to get up to speed with China, there's certain products, there's 2 types
Or just, could be Vietnam as well.
Yeah. So, and there's certain products where the buyer is looking to get the same thing, but not in China, right? The quickest way to deal with a product that is currently made in China and you want to offer an alternative in India, then the quickest way is to study China. Shortcut it. The way that I would do it is you go there and understand the machinery and operations. Potentially, they all at the end of the day also want to the factories that have machines and the machines are made by other factories. There is a situation where you can actually just import a lot of the parts over here and make the same product, and
it's a bit more expensive.
That's an expensive strategy. It's also a risky strategy. You're going to have to fly over some Chinese engineers and understand how the whole machinery works, and over time try to domesticate that machinery and maybe throw in some Indian machinery into the production so that it's a little bit de-risked from China. That's one way. You can also do a strategy where you focus on products that China is unable to compete with you anyways. So for example, what I was talking about earlier, if you focus on consumables, food or cosmetics, these
leather goods.
Yeah, these are leather goods. Yeah,
leather goods as well. We're more competitive than China.
Yes, absolutely.
PU and nylon and polyester, they're a lot more competitive.
So if you just focus on areas where they're not a competition anyways, that's an area to get business, because you still have, let's say in items like food production and cosmetic production, you have the same dynamic going across all of US and Europe, that labor cost is out of control. None of the factories can be profitable anymore. They can, but only at a very, very high scale. And you have younger brands trying to get into make a new makeup or make a new food brand, but because of the labor and the insurance and all these liability, blah, 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 they cannot produce anything at a low minimum order quantity in America or Europe anymore. Here comes India, and we can do it for you. We're okay with low MOQ. We're able to do it at this price, and we air ship it to you, we ocean ship it to you, and here's your shampoo or here's your food product. And this has already happened. So a lot of the consumables like vitamins, certain food product is already shifting here. Americans and Europeans are already trying to avoid producing in their own country because it's becoming less and less profitable. And I have certain colleagues. So I've made shampoo and conditioner now 3 times in the last 3 years for 3 different clients. And you working with the American factory, which is where they usually right now, the situation is that you'll go into the store and see that most of the shampoos in America are made in America. That's going to change, because the colleagues that I have that are factory owners, everyone is hurting. They cannot maintain labor. The minimum wages are too high. There's too many insurances and regulations and certifications. And here comes India and Korea, where it's all done like this, and very unregulated, but able to maintain the same level of quality, standards, cleanliness, and price you want, MOQ you want.
MOQ is minimum order quantity.
Minimum order quantity, meaning how small can I make the order,
right,
in order to still allow you to do this order for me.
Right.
So there's so much opportunity there, and it's already happening on a small level, and it's going to continue to. These products are going to continue to flow, this business flow into India. And what I was saying before, China can never take that business from India or Korea, because there's a perception that how can a shampoo be made in China? How can a food be made in China? I'm not going to eat that, not going to use that.
Right.
So you have a natural barrier. You also have a natural barrier against China in any category where people are concerned about the safety or the quality, like anything baby.
Yeah.
Anything related to baby, people are super careful. Some of the biggest baby lines in the US and Europe proudly market made in India. It'll be right on the packaging. If it's made in China, they'll hide it.
But they're okay with made
in India. So there's an inherent trust of the brand India, that it's in India, so natural is not a contradiction, safe is not a contradiction. This is there.
And that's sort of what the government is trying to do as well, right? They're really trying to promote make in India and made in India. And hopefully that branding just kind of like is elevated over a period of time, and our goods can possibly be sold throughout the world. But so to sum it up, you'd say, obviously we need to look at the white space where it's difficult to unplug from China completely, but we have to look at products and services that the Chinese are not able to do as well, or they're not as competitive. B, I'd probably say professionalism in terms of response time, in terms of communication with the client as well, and probably C, and this is going to take more time, infrastructure and development, right?
I think you summed it up pretty nicely there.
Yeah.
Those three things.
Great. Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful chat, and I feel like we can go on and on talking about global trade and share and swap some war stories as well.
Yeah,
and we've done some of that, in this podcast in terms of our experiences dealing with people and also our shared love for travel. It's been fantastic. Any closing thoughts in terms of what your views are on global trade, in terms of the opportunities for entrepreneurs who want to get into this line of work? And also, if you can close it out with where one can find you online.
Sure, yeah. I think that there's two general categories where there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm very excited for the future for Indian exporters in general. And on the one side, you have the Indian capabilities in terms of manufacturing and trading. And in that, those are situations where Indian manufacturers are becoming global players for certain commodities, certain globally important products, which people want to shift away the supply chain from China so they're not dependent on China.
Right.
So there's so much opportunity for India to become globally important on certain critical products that are key to the global supply chain, right? There's another category which I think is also very interesting and fun for young Indian entrepreneurs and really Indian entrepreneurs of all ages, which is, I think what happened to Korean products in the last 5 years is going to happen in a big way for Indian products on a global level. So 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, if I told someone I'm using a Korean shampoo, they'll be like, why? In the US, they'll be like, why would you use why don't you use an American shampoo? It's from Korea. There was no name associated with between Korea and beauty.
Right.
But Korea now the culture became cool. Movies exported, and some of the Korean shows, the top shows in the US, like that one, I forget which one that is, but some Korean shows are the top TV shows in the US. And
so that's
Squid Games.
Soft cultural exchange also helps in trade.
Exactly. It helps in trade, but also it's the opportunity for Indian brands to become cool on a global level. And those are different types of entrepreneurs, right? And it's their opportunity to shine too, because you have here the factory and manufacturing people, different brain, a lot of industrial engineer types, right? The scientists, engineers, right? It's their time to shine. On this side, you have the part of India which is creative, which has passion. They're into cooking, they're into food, they're into Ayurveda, they're into whatever. And it's the opportunity for them to make global brands, which along with Indian culture being exported, like our movies have become popular, for TV shows, food, celebrities have become global, not just Bollywood local. Same way, Indian brands are going to become global because Indian culture is becoming globally accepted. So it's an exciting thing on the horizon for those that are more the creative types to do something where it's going to have a world impact and be a global brand, not just an Indian brand.
Right. Also, Indians, I must add, are now, I believe, the wealthiest minority in the US, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Because I've seen videos online where a lot of, YouTubers and podcasters are talking about what are Indians doing right? The kids are well educated. They end up becoming CEOs in global firms. And then there's this whole focus on being, overall, they end up making a name for themselves and doing pretty well in life. So I think the perception of the average Indian from, let's say, the 80s to now has also changed, because Indian entrepreneurs are working, your Googles and Microsofts.
Yeah.
So they're really sort of coming of age and really shining on a global platform. So that probably helps a lot as well.
Absolutely. All that ties in and leads into a general positive perception, brand India, and this being the century where we really have an opportunity in front of us to
hopefully this decade.
Forget century. How about decade? I agree. Yeah.
Great. Rohit, if someone has to find you online, where can they find you?
So primarily right now I'm on Instagram. My handle is It's Rohit Kumar, and that's where you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And it didn't feel like this is the first time we were chatting. I feel like there's been so much to talk about and so many things in common. And I hope we can continue our conversations offline as well. And I'm going to have to get you back sometime on your trip.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
I would love to
have another chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.